Welcome to Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, brought to you by Holy Chuck Burgers. Our business is burgers.
Good morning, Katarina Witt. There's no such thing as bad boys, only boys with bad hair.
Sponsored by Maxwell's Clothiers, your bespoke tailor since 1961. And now, your host of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, Chuck Bastie. And welcome back. This is Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo. We'd like to thank Padskins for bringing you the show today. I'm Cam LaRock, your producer, and once again, I'm joined by Chuck Bastie, our host. Chuck, what's going on?
Hey, Cam. Thanks a lot for the intro there. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. We got a show today with Jim Thomson on.
Yeah.
And I've had Jim on the show a few times before in the past, but he's always such an entertaining and giving and sharing guest as well. So I'm really excited about having him on the show today.
Yeah, you told me a bit about Jim before we started, but I'm really excited to hear from him and his story. And I know you got a few good stories to tell as well.
Well, the opening one is my lead in because so this is years ago, and I mean I'd have to talk to Jim about what year this was. I want to say it was like 2006 or 2007. And I'm playing with Mike Gartner and Wes Jarvis, and Mike and Wes have a 3-on-3 ring up in Newmarket. And my one thing as a goalie is to keep Mike Gartner off the score sheet. That's all. That's my whole game plan the entire day. I know. And he's an assassin. Everybody knows how fast he is, how good he is. But the one day that I actually did it, I kept him off the score sheet the entire day. He didn't score on me. But some other guy came in, this clown came in and lit me up like a Christmas tree. I mean, he beat me left, straight, between the legs, over the shoulder, glove hand, low blocker. I mean, deked.
No chance.
He made me look stupid, and I mean stupid. And we're in the dressing room after the game, and this clown, ends up leaving right away. Like first guy out of the dressing, thanks guys, see you later, and off he goes. And I looked at Gartz, I'm like, who was that guy? And Gartz goes, well, Chuck, that's Jimmy Thomson. And I'm like, where did he play? Because that guy has massive skills. And he's like, well, we played together in Washington together. And it's like, why have I never heard of Jim Thomson? And Gartz said the funniest thing. He's like, well, Chuck, the way I tell the story is Jim Thomson and I, how do you say, we teamed up together in the NHL and scored, 712 goals. I got 708 of those. And then the whole dressing room laughs, right? I'm like, wait a minute. That guy there, Snipey McSnipey, scored 4 goals in his entire NHL career. And Gartz goes, yeah, Chuck, and 2 of those came in one game. And I'm like, how does that guy there, he's incredible.
Yeah.
Why have I not heard of him? And Gartz says, well, Chuck, you're just going to have to ask him. So, one day came and I was at an arena and I saw Jim and I went up to him and I'm like, hey, listen, I don't know if you remember me. You lit me up like a Christmas tree at Gartner's rink. And I want to know what happened. Why were you not on every kid's wall as a player? And he told me this fascinating story that I'm going to share with everybody today.
Yeah. Well, I guess it sounds like you maybe can match up with Mike Gartner, but you don't got a chance with Jim Thomson. So
Jim Thomson is an assassin with a stick. I mean, I don't know what Jim is. He's in his mid-50s right now. He's got a birthday come up at the end of December. But yeah, he can still light you up like a Christmas tree. On the ice and off the ice.
Yeah. I kind of want to hear Jim's side of the story, so I think we should bring him up and I should get out of here.
Let's do that. Let's bring up Jim Thomson.
How you doing, boys?
There he is, Jim Thomson. Were you listening to my intro?
I listened to it, Chuck. I'll never forget that morning. It was a lot of fun. It was my first time playing with Mike. They'd invited me out, Chris King and the guys, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go out and try it. And I do remember you in the dressing room, this blonde, curly-haired goalie making jokes. And, I wasn't saying much because my first time there. And you were right. I was the first guy out of the room. I had to go to work. But, yeah, I had a good morning that morning. So I enjoyed.
Oh, my God. Legendary. And you had race car Johnny with you that day, too.
That's right, Johnny Graham. That's right. Yeah.
And they're all making fun of race car Johnny, and I just like, why are you guys making fun of race car Johnny when that guy just lit me up like a Christmas tree? And I'll never forget how Gart said that to me and just said, you're gonna have to ask Jim Thomson about that. And when I saw you at the arena one day, and I just said, hey, listen, like I want you to tell what happened. Like you told me the greatest story, and I thought we could start with that as well. It's like how you got your start off with in as an underager in junior hockey, and the story that changed your life.
Yeah. So I was 14 years old. I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, and um, I was scoring a lot of goals in midget hockey back then, and so I went up at 14 to junior B. I got called up to the team, and I'll never forget it. We didn't wear face masks back then, and in warm up, they were playing this team from Stony Plain, and they had these two massive guys with beards, and I'm like, this is like the real deal, right? So anyway, the game went on, and I'd actually just scored a goal, and one of these big guys with the beards just decked me from behind, and he's looking over me, and he starts mumbling something. And I got up, and having three older brothers that hit first, ask questions later. And what happened was, my instincts, I dropped my gloves and caught this guy right on the chin with a lucky punch, and he goes down. And I ended up staying in junior B, Chuck, that the rest of that year, and got this reputation of this goal scorer that you better watch it, because that story traveled, and I never asked for it. It wasn't like I didn't. My story. I don't like fighting.
Yeah.
Didn't like fighting, and I'm against the violence now. But that's how it all started, and I could always score goals, as you pertain to in your intro. But sadly, I got into a role that I don't ever look back on and say that I would never do it again. But it helped me get to my dream in the NHL, and I was fortunate enough to play and score 4 goals. And it should have been, as you said, it should have been many more. I did have some success in junior in the minors in the American Hockey League. One year I was on a 50 goal pace. So when I got to play hockey, I can definitely put the puck in the net. But playing with fellows like Gretzky and different guys on different teams, Gartner, my role was to go out and bang and play tough.
Speaking of Gartner, Cam's got a picture of you there on the screen with your draft year with the Capitals as well. How old are you in this picture?
I would have been 18, and
Wow.
I'm gonna tell you, that day, I talked to different teams, and Capitals weren't even on the radar. And when I got a call from Jack Button, the late Jack Button, it was 9:15 at night. My best friend and my mom, we were sitting in my mom's trailer. I grew up in a mobile home, and so we're sitting there. And back then, the first 3 rounds were shown on TSN, and then it shut off. And then you just wait for a phone call, and there was no social media back then. And finally, the phone rang at 9:15, I believe it was, at night, and I was a Washington Capital draft pick, which was just, the start of this whole dream, right?
Yeah. So walk me through like your process, because everybody else has draft day. You only get drafted once. Like the work just begins for you at that point. And you report to camp, and you're a young kid that has a lot to prove. You had a great tenure with the Marlies as well coming in. So like walk us through all that.
So you get drafted, and then I went to my first training camp. It was a tough one, because 2 days into it, my father was really sick, and I had to fly home 2 days into it, and he ended up passing away the day I got home. So that kind of shook things up, as far as I was never going to make the Capitals that year. But I went back to Capitals camp, and they were so gracious to me, under the circumstances of a young 19-year-old kid just lost his father. And that stuck out to me. I remember, getting on the ice with, the likes of Mike Gartner and Rod Langway and Scott Stevens and all these terrific hockey players. And, I'm just sitting there going, it was just so surreal for a kid that grew up in a trailer park, and, my backstory, you could know all that. And, and then I went back to the Toronto Marlboros and had a really good year. Scored, I think, 23 goals that year. And then, went from there. I went to back to Washington camp, and got sent to Binghamton, their farm team, Binghamton, New York, and played parts of 3 seasons there before I finally got called up. And it's the life and the journey of a junior hockey player going from your junior roots into the fishbowl of pro hockey, and it's like you're thrown in and figure it out. I lived with 2 guys, Grant Jennings, who won 2 Stanley Cups with Pittsburgh. We were all rookies. He was from the West. Yves Baudouin, who was from the Quebec League. So 3 of us rented a house in Binghamton, New York, and there was 3 guys who said, okay, we're playing pro hockey, and here we go. So, I look back and think of how innocent we were, how we had to figure it all out ourselves. It's not like today where a lot of things are done for you. And it was just an awesome, awesome memory.
So I've heard you tell this story before, but it's such a great story about your first game come up and you had to shadow a legendary guy named Mario Lemieux. So I figured I'd just digress and let you tell that story.
Yeah. So what happens is we're playing in Hershey, and after the game, whenever the Washington Brass was there, David Poyle, Brian Murray, Terry Murray, Warren Strelo, the goalie coach, they'd always stand off, not by the bus, but they'd stand off. And we shared the farm team. It was Hartford and Washington, half Washington players, half Hartford. So what would normally happen is that you'd come out of the dressing room, right, put your bag on the bus, and they would, hey, how you doing? Good game, Jimmy. And you'd get on the bus. It's not like you went over there and they were going to talk to all of us. And if you saw a player walk over to them, normally what it meant, Chuck, was he's getting called up. So there was many, many times where the Washington Brass were there that, this guy would get called up, pull your bag back off the bus. And you sit there and go, wow, I just, I hope it's me one day, because you're so close. You're in the minors waiting for that chance to play in the NHL. So ironically, this trip, unbeknownst to me, they had me covering a 50 goal scorer in Hershey named Ross Fitzpatrick. And Larry Plow was our coach in Binghamton. So it was premeditated, if you will, that I was going to cover this guy. There will be no fighting, just stay with him. So I covered him over the weekend, and he got his points on the power play, but I actually kept him scoreless. Had Berube and all their tough guys, Mike Struthers, I'll never forget it, coming out to fight me. And so it was very simple, no fighting, just do this job. So we played him over the 2 games. I did a good job. And that Sunday, sure enough, when I walked out, they're like, Jimmy, come here. And my heart started beating, and I'm thinking,
Oh, yeah.
And they all, you had a great job this weekend. You're going to play tomorrow night against Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I drove back to the hotel, back to Washington with Warren Strelo, and went to the pregame skate in the morning. And obviously, all the players from training camp. So again, there's Gartner, Scott Stevens, Kevin Hatcher, Kelly Miller. It's funny, I was just at the Washington alumni weekend, and Kelly Miller is part of the story, so I reminded him of it. So what happens is in the morning, we're skating around, and Brian Murray's just like, how you feeling? I'm like, oh, I'm excited. And I honestly thought I was going up to fight Jay Caulfield and, play tough, go out there and throw some big hits and get into it. So after the pregame skate, I get called into the coach's room, and Brian Murray says, how you doing? And I said, I'm good. Like, this is the moment I've been waiting for, kind of thing. And David Poyle said, well, you did such a good job this weekend. We're going to have you cover Mario Lemieux tonight.
Oh, boy.
And that's when think about this, your emotions of getting called up for your first game is one emotion.
Yeah.
Pre-game skate, the NHL, as you know, the NHL pre-game skate is probably the best. Like, it's just so awesome.
Yeah.
And then I get called in, and I'm like, is this for real? So the instructions were very simple. You just stay with him wherever he goes, get under his skin, try to get him to take penalties. He doesn't like it when guys are covering him. And Brian Murray made it very clear, you stay with him wherever he goes. So anyway, the game starts. I'm doing a wonderful job. He takes a penalty on me. He's pissed off. Two of the reasons Mario retired The first time was number one was the cancer, as we know.
Yeah.
But he even came out and said this was guys like me when coaches would butcher and Kasperitis and all these
clutch and
guys.
grab.
Yeah, clutch grab. You just got tired of it. So, well, that would be a segue into another story. But so, anyways, I'm doing an unbelievable job, Chuck, for a period and just over a period and a half. And Kevin Hatcher all of a sudden springs loose. Kelly Miller is the left winger, and I'm the high guy. We have a 3-on-1. And I'll never forget it was on Rod Buskus. And because I ended up playing with Rod. So what happens is Kevin Hatcher, I'm in the slot. Kelly's going to the net, and Kevin goes to give me a pass, and it's like a 1-foot pass. Instead of just kind of sliding it back to me, it's like a 1-foot pass. And then, what was I going to? I just had somebody come in. So it's like a 1-foot pass, and then it goes over my stick to Lemieux lifting another stick, and basically gets on a semi breakaway. Doesn't score. I come back to the bench, and Brian Murray is losing it on me, and Brian had this lisp,
Yeah.
He was screaming, you sit down, you're going back to the effing minors. And so I went from the first period intermission to the Mike Gartners pat me on the back saying, keep it up, Jimmy, great job, to sitting in the middle of the bench basically saying, okay, well, that worked out well, right?
Yeah.
So I never got another shift that game. I ended up staying up for 9 more games, and sadly I got into a fight with Mike Lawler on Hockey Night in Canada, and I severed the tendon in my hand. I hit him with an uppercut, and I went in for emergency surgery. So that ended up ending most of my season. But back to the story, I was at the alumni with Kelly Miller, and I started bringing the story up. He goes, I'll never forget it. He said, I'll never forget Brian losing it on you. And I said, he goes, I felt so bad for you. It was your first game, and and it was just like he was laughing. He goes, I'll never forget it. But that was my fault. I shouldn't have left him. Was I broke what Brian asked me. But ironically, we had a lead throughout that whole game. And Mario didn't get a point. If you go back and look at the game sheet, and they came back late and won it 4-3. And I held them off the game sheet for almost 2 periods. So, it was a great memory. But yeah, that was my very first NHL game. And just quickly. So doing some work with Ottawa, I was down at the alumni box, and Mario was in the box 2 boxes down. And I said, I got to go talk to him. So I went in. He had no idea who I was. Hey, Mario, former NHL player Jim Thomson. Hey, how you doing? I reminded him of that night. And I'm going to tell you this, Chuck. He remembered the night because he said he used to get really angry with Brian Murray when Brian would do this. He said, I don't remember you. And then I said to him, he was standing with the buddy. I go, I said, Mario, what was funny about the whole thing with me? I go, I just got called up. That was my very first NHL game, and they asked me to cover you. And he hit his buddy, and he's said a few funny words, and he's like, "Holy, right? Like, wow, like what an experience." Because he understood the pressures of that, right?
The ramifications of that, especially covering, the next Gretzky that's out there as well. There's a picture of you down in Washington with the alumni as well. That Cam just has thrown up, and we'll get back to that as well before the show comes back to the Capitals. But I wanted to just talk about, after you started with your NHL career, you're now coming into fighting. You're dealing with anxiety, or you're dealing with all the pressures that every NHL player deals with, obviously, up and down. Bus rides. You're not taking plane rides like the big club is, and you're grinded out there, and you're getting your face punched in. Every single game that you're going out there trying to put some digits on the board, but you're being looked at for pins as well. So can you just walk us through a little bit more what that toll took on you in your career and in your mental health?
So, I will say this: I had 195 penalty minutes my rookie year in Binghamton, and here I am, a 19-year-old kid coming in playing against men. Now, I was pretty tough in junior, but I'm not tough playing against Archie Hendersons and Bennett Walsh and Marty McSorleys and Bob Proberts and Joey Koshers. All these guys were in the American Hockey League. So I'm just this kid that had a little bit of success fighting in the OHL that now is kind of put into a role where they're going, okay, you're gonna stay here. Because the next step down is the ECHL. Nobody wanted to go down there, so you had to stay in the American Hockey League. So right away, I started, getting into beefs, and that was giving me more ice time, more opportunity. We had a player who still goes down in my eyes as one of the toughest guys to ever play the game of hockey. His name was Shane Churla, and he ended up getting called up to to Hartford. But he taught me a lot about, because he was a guy that his first year in the American Hockey League, I had 109 minutes. He had 300 and some minutes. Like, he was fighting everybody. So he kind of gave me some courage to say, you know what, as much as I was anxiety and the stress and pressures, he kind of gave me, that backbone of saying, hey, we can do this. So that year when I had my exit meetings, and Brian Murray basically said to me, he goes, you had a good rookie season, but if you want to make the Washington Capitals, you got to fight more. Here I'm thinking I did more than I was capable of. So that year I got sent back, after Caps camp, went back to Binghamton, and it's ironically my first Cap scrimmage. I had 3 fights in my first day. So I said, okay, you wanted me to fight more. As much as I didn't like it, I went out and fought 3 times in the first day, and then there's like, okay, enough of that. Let's wait for exhibition games. But then you get sent back down. So that next year, Chuck, I had 41 fights in 57 games.
That's crazy.
And hated every part of it. Did it because my dream was to get to the NHL, and I proved within myself, as much as I didn't like it, and the stress and the anxiety that it brought me, that I did it. So then got called up, and my career went from there.
I want to segue from what you learned in the NHL, because I always say this, like, some of the great NHL players that I've talked to, always, if they really get it, and I've talked about this ad nauseum as well, but for the audience that's watching right now, it's 0.1% of who you are as a human being that plays hockey. Especially in Toronto, they get a really bad rap here because Maple Leafs here are hockey players first who happen to be human beings, and everywhere else, like hockey, just you're a human being first who happens to play hockey really well. In Toronto, they get that backwards because the hype and the pressure is so intense on the Maple Leafs and the organization. And there's a few other teams, obviously, that follow that pattern as well. But the toll it took on you as a player, and now that what you do is, I've seen you in action with your JT prospect camps, and you've been in for 20 years. And one of the great things I love about your platform is you never tell kids, or you never told kids that I saw, don't do drugs, don't drink. You came across one level. This is why I drank. This is why I did drugs. This is the anxiety I was dealing with. And you start to give these kids better tools to deal with than what you had as a pro to deal with. So that way, armed with new tools, these kids now have people to talk to. They have tools to deal with anxiety. They can avoid addiction or mental health issues. And I think that's a much bigger legacy of what your pro career has garnered out for Jim Thomson now, of what you teach now forward. So I thought we'd just talk about that for what you do with the Aurora Tigers that you now own, as well as your JT prospect camp.
So yeah, and it's, you learn through the journey and recovery and all these things that the surrounding story of why you want to say don't do drugs or don't drink or don't chew, don't smoke. I had tons of experience growing up in an alcoholic family, parents who died both of cancer because of smoking and drinking, 2 brothers that died the same way. So it's pretty obvious that I had the platform to tell a young person, if you do this, chances are you're going to get sick. That's what science tells us, because I'm living proof of watching it around me. Starting drinking and doing drugs at 12 years old, this is myself, and why I thought that was okay is because monkey see, monkey do. My dad worked in the oil rigs, would come home for 2.5 days on a weekend. My mom raised 10 kids or 9 kids. I'm the youngest of 10. And then, never drove a car and drank every day and smoked cigarettes. That was her life, raising kids. So, what you are saying, Chuck, I can tell a young person, this will happen.
Mhm.
This will happen if you start. And, it's very hard to quit. I had somebody, it's so funny. I had somebody today said my biggest accomplishment, talking about me, who's known me most of my life, was not the NHL or anything, but the fact that I beat drugs and alcohol. They're
Yeah.
like, that is a really tough mountain to climb. And I'm like, wow, yes, it is. I know that. So just the messages, my messages, because of my experience and now doing interventions and, working with families and working with people. I travel around, as you know, all over the place to help and assist in, saving lives. And I always say this, one life at a time. So
Mm.
saving one family member saves grandmother, grandfather, mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a
Ripple
whole
effect.
bunch of people that are depending on this one person not to break their heart. An addiction right now, and I don't even like to bring the word up of COVID, but make no mistake, we are still getting pounded by the aftermath
Oh yeah.
of what went on during that time. And I'm saddened to see what I deal with, what I experience in the people that I go and help, and it's tragic. So yeah, telling a kid, don't do this, this is why you don't do this. My hockey team here, we don't allow kids to chew, smoke, or I'm not going to get into the legalization of marijuana, but that's another, being a former dope head, I was addicted to marijuana, and all it did was make me freaking tired and, depressed and anxious. And I needed to keep doing it to stay calm. And it was a terrible addiction I had. So when the government said, well, let's do this, I'm going, this is going to be tragic to our kids. So
Yeah.
now these kids can get on a vape pen, you know, we used to be terrified to be caught with a joint, smoking a joint around a building or whatever. It's all over the place now. So, anyway, the best way to quit something is not try it. And that's what I tell these kids.
Well, I want to talk about the platform that you've now that you and Rita own the Aurora Tigers. You have for 17 years now, or no?
No, this is our 10th year. 10th
Okay, yeah.
year.
So your 10th year this year.
2025. This is our 26th year JT Prospects, our 10th year of Aurora Tigers.
Okay, so when you bought the Tigers 10 years ago,
Yep.
you took obviously the platform that you have, JT Prospects, coming into Junior A hockey. There's a ton of pressure that goes on with these kids, and there's a culture that goes on with owning a team. And obviously, you can have X's and O's in hockey, hire great coaches and have a great program as well. But there's a secondary part that we never talk about in the hockey world, that unless you're on a board of directors on a junior team or you're an owner like yourself. So let's talk about a little bit about the pressures of what the kids deal with, the anxiety, everything that's going on for them, especially post COVID, in junior hockey, like the state of junior hockey for you as an owner.
So it's funny. I saw a post yesterday, and it's a boy walking into the hockey arena with this hockey bag. And the caption was, is he walking in afraid of failure and being, yelled at when he leaves? Could be by parents, could be by coaches. Or is he walking into the hockey arena loving his life, loving in the game? There's two things that go on there. So when we deal with these young players, Chuck, they're getting a platform to further their careers, to get to college hockey. If they can get to college hockey or the OHL or a higher league, then they have that opportunity to maybe live out their dream like I did and play in the NHL. It's a climbing a mountain, as I call it. The pressures are immense. They come here from minor hockey. A lot of them struggle because it's very, very difficult junior A to play at this level. And they may have been a scorer, or a top goalie at their level, and very few will come into the OJHL and have major success because it's such an adjustment. So now what we got is kids who are used to that success, that are now probably struggling with anxiety, struggling with mental health, depression because they're not doing well, and mom and dad could be going, "What's wrong with you?" And my coach ain't this, or like whatever. whatever the story may be. So when you ask me the question, what I see in all these young guys, we do our best to keep them balanced with, it's going to be great one day and it's going to be tough another day. So stay balanced. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. And, it's tough when they're these young guys that want everything at once. And, we got players, when am I going to get called from a school? Well, the schools will call when they're ready to call. If you're good enough, they'll find you, bottom line.
Yep.
So, and then it gets to, are they doing enough work? Are they doing enough from away from the rink? Are they, when we talk about McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, all these great players who are in the gym constantly, eating properly, how much are these young guys helping themselves? So all this goes into a formula of, are they maximizing their opportunity, or are they stressed out and suffering from mental health because it's not working out?
Yeah, and you bring that point about the struggling and mental health, but like I've obviously seen you in on the job doing this, having this conversation with the kids, creating that camaraderie with them, that culture that goes inside the Tigers as well. That the amount of tireless work that you guys do in the community as well, that just never stops, and you're always there. Finally, this year you get kind of acknowledged for being elected into the Aurora Hall of Fame. We'll get back to that in a second. But when it comes down to your culture as well, like you have a saying that I always love to hear, like to be an everydayer, and like you mentioned the word balance and being able to give these kids the ability to show up. And then again, peaks and balances, wins, losses, they're all going to come. It's just a matter of like, how do you deal with this? Because this is a practice field right now for out there what's going to hit you in life. When you leave hockey, you're going to go out, you're going to get hit by life, in a relationship or in a job or in your career or in education. And how do you deal with it? What's the adversity that you face? And I find these days, and I'm on the board of a junior club as well, but the perseverance of kids these days, they just don't have it. I mean, like my generation, I think was the last generation that we had, we just started having high-speed internet. Now all these kids have high-speed everything. The nutrition's great. There's more money now than there's ever been. They have every resource and opportunity available. And if it doesn't come to them, like right away, they're like, what do you mean? Like, what do I do? So how do you deal with the kids and teach them what perseverance is and dedication and purpose, to be able to stick with that, to give them the tools so that way they can be successful in hockey and most importantly, life after hockey?
It's a great question. I love answering it. It's simple. If you work hard and you're doing everything right, you're going to have success. There's the saying, luck is when preparation and hard work meet. And if you think about that for a second, we all have to have some luck. I had luck getting through my journey to get to my dream of playing in the NHL. I had to be lucky in some areas. Well, those are the times, Chuck, that I was living the right way, working my ass off, doing all the right things, right? Crossing my T's, dotting my I's, going to bed early, eating properly, working out 3 times a day. And guess what? The hard work got me to where I needed to get to. And this isn't everybody. So when I say this, it's not like I'm throwing stones at the new, culture, the new, generation and all that. But, we didn't have phones. We had nothing. All we had was a hockey stick, frozen ice ponds, street hockey, hills to run, pucks to shoot. And today the distraction with these young people is separating, and I'll go back to Sidney Crosby, from 97% of all other hockey players. So to find that one guy that will do everything and anything to succeed, right? They're there, but it's rare. It's rare. And I say that with all due respect to all the athletes.
Yeah.
There's so many distractions that these young guys have, or young girls have, that it's hard to get everything, the everydayer. We talk about the everydayer, and it's hard. So I don't fault them. They didn't ask for the cell phone and TikTok and all these different things that, they spend hours and hours on. We're all guilty of it. There's nothing more I like than getting in my lazy boy and looking at social media, watching a hockey game. It's the most peaceful thing I can do, right? So even I'm guilty of it, right? But imagine you're trying to be successful as a hockey player or whatever you're doing, and you have all these distractions. So, did you do your off ice work? Not no, I didn't have time with homework and all that. Well, guess what? What's 45 to an hour of what you're supposed to be doing, shooting pucks or all that, but they don't find the time. Very few find the time now, and that holds a lot of these young people back from succeeding.
Yeah. I want to segue right now. We got some pictures of the home opener that you had in September with the Aurora Tigers. So we're just going to pull some pictures too. We're just going to have you look at them. I don't know if you can see the screen.
Yep.
There's your banners coming into the rink there.
Yep.
You had your mayor show up as well. We'll get to him as well. But yeah, there we go. That's Tom.
Great guy. Big fan of ours. He'll be dropping the puck here tomorrow. Tomorrow, ironically, it'll be the biggest crowd that we've had since we've owned the team. It's going to be just around 1,000 school day, 1,000 kids. Very excited. So the mayor will be there dropping the puck tomorrow.
That's awesome. There's just before the puck, the calm before the storm. Ice looks amazing. Good paint job. There's your spotlight on your ceremony of puck drop as well, opening night. That's where it all happens. And we got one more of you just at the back side in your office where you're at right now, I think. There we go with your Mixed Chicks, his mixed hair products. Because you got the flow.
Like what? I love it, eh? I gotta tell you this. I love them. Great product.
Yeah, it's my go-to because I can't put enough moisture in my hair. So like the Mixed Chicks and the his mixed line, everywhere I go, I have that with me as my staple as well too. But like, you look pretty proud there, Jimmy.
Well, I think my hair looks pretty good today.
I think you're pretty stressed there because there was a delay that night where the smallest glass in the world got broken.
Yeah,
and
off. It was off.
It was an hour delay as well too. But I mean, like,
I always say, it's meant for a reason. We all waited.
Yeah.
We it's not all about winning. We ended up losing that night 5-4, and it was a great night for many. And so, yeah, opening night's always fun in the jungle.
Yeah, and like I want to segue as well from being with the Tigers, that you finally get recognized as well. The Aurora Hall of Fame called you this year, and you got the call just before the start of fall there, and you just had the ceremony like a couple weeks ago as well. And
we
got some pictures here. We're just going to roll through those. So you just take a look at the pictures and you just tell me what comes up for you.
Well, first of all, I went in with 3, great gentlemen, families. A couple of them are deceased, but when you get the call, when we moved to Aurora, Chuck, and you start volunteering, I started volunteering being a former NHL player long before I owned the Tigers, and just you do your thing. I do my thing. I said this at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony that a lot of it has to do with the team because the players being in the community, representing, us, the town, all this had a lot to do with it, all the hours that we put in. But, what an honor. What an honor to be recognized for a lot of quiet success. I call it behind the scenes, doing charity work, helping people. And you don't set out to say, "Ooh, I'm going to start doing this because I'm going to be rewarded for it one day." And just it's a surprise call that I was like, "Wow, that's it was an honor." Until it's still one of the highlights. The fact I had all my kids there. My daughter lives in Texas, so to have your family there to celebrate this, because my family knows what my I frustrated my kids a lot because I said, we're going to clean up Magna. We're going to do this. Why do we got to come? Because that's what we're going to do. So, as much as, I was involved, they were forced to be involved because, picking up garbage, it's the right thing to do. What kid wants to go pick up garbage in a ditch on a Saturday afternoon, right? You think I'm going to do this by myself? Let's go. But that's the stuff I'm talking about. So now that they're older adults, they can appreciate what everything that went on, because as we say, planting seeds in young people, my expectations would be for them to carry on this legacy of giving back is much better than taking, right?
Yeah, yeah, and much more fulfilling as well. I mean,
Oh,
you
100.
have that purpose, where you come back. You always have that one saying that I always remembered as well. Like whenever you point your finger, you've got three fingers pointing
Well,
back
it
at
was
you.
Gretzky. It was Gretzky. We're in
You know what I
Boston,
mean?
and one of I won't mention his name, but one of our teammates, one of made a mistake, and they scored a goal, and he was mad because he was on for the goal, and so we got back in between periods, and he starts like, "What? You got to be da 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 da." And Gretzky said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Quit pointing your finger. We all make mistakes, and when you make a mistake, you don't have 20 pointing back at you.
Yeah.
Like, stop." And it was a great lesson to say, yeah, like everybody's going to make mistakes, so don't point the finger.
Yeah, and there's the whole thing about the mental health aspect as well. I mean, like when people give you grace, you know, there's a difference between accountability, which we all need, and I think there's nothing wrong with accountability. How it comes at you, from a safe place. If I respect you, like I'll say, Taves, from Chicago, there's that one clip in the playoffs where he goes to the playoff in the penalty box, and I forget who it was in the penalty box, but he's freaking out. And Taves goes over there and he says, basically, get your head out of your ass. And then he immediately calms down. You know, adrenaline's pumping. It's playoff hockey. There's 18,000 fans looking at you, a million people watching on TV. That doesn't feel good. But when you get the accountability from someone that you respect and that you admire, and you're just like, it comes from a safe place because that guy there is not here to rip me a new asshole. This guy here is here to help me or help the team or help to better our position. Because it's all about the good of the whole, the altruism in this, and I'm being put back in line, and I follow this guy because he's a great leader, and he performs, and I trust him and I like him, and more importantly, I respect him. That gets that in line. So that way, when you get that direction, from above, there's nothing in a conversation that's going to come that's going to be uncomfortable. Sure, it can be confronting, but
Yeah.
it's not going to be something where you're just like, they're like, I hear what you're saying. I understand your point of view. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me as well. And then you make it a safe place where we're all keeping each other accountable as well, moving towards our goal. Thoughts?
Listen, what makes a great leader is not a bully, not a tyrant, is somebody who will, and I always said this about Gretzky, he treated everybody the same. And when he spoke, you listened, but never did he attack. Never, the great leaders, Rod Langway, like all these great captains, Ron Francis, I got to play with, Kirk Muller, Scott Stevens, they were all about they led by example. And then when they spoke, you listened because then you realize the uniqueness, I call it, and why they are so great. It's not just their game, it's what they hand down in information to say, this is how it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned over my years watching these, outstanding human beings. Forget hockey. Just, I always said this: Gretzky was a better human being and father than he was a hockey player because he treated
Wow.
everybody the same. Like he'd come in and he would treat us fourth liners as good as he would treat Coffee and Curry. And that's what made him special. And just there's no judgment. It's about team. And another thing I loved what he said was leave all your garbage outside the rink.
Yeah.
This is our time. You come to the rink. This is our time. Everybody's got issues. Leave them at the door because we can't have it affect our team. And that's another thing we even they're a lot younger, but the Aurora Tigers, like, guys, you got a problem, come in and talk to us. Let's
Yeah.
try to help you. But don't be going in the dressing room with, drama and there's nothing worse, right? Bringing the group down. So, as you say, leadership is a huge thing in our society now. And, I don't like bullies.
I think it's really funny. I'm smiling here right now because I'm trying not to laugh about this, but I just saw that Gretzky commercial yesterday where he's chirping McDavid on that betting. I don't know if you've seen it, but uh, Gretzky's just such a gentleman. He's such an ambassador of the game that whenever he chirps somebody, it's just so out of character for him that it's funny. And they always
Mm-hmm.
seem to cast Gretzky in that role as a commercial where he's chirping somebody. And, he's doing his little betting online here, and McDavid's taking shots on the ice, and Gretzky's on the bench. McDavid's like, "Hey, can you keep it down here? I'm trying to take some shots." And Gretzky's like, "Because you need it."
Yeah.
And he goes like, and Gretzky would never say something like that because it's like totally out of his character, but he's just chirping him over and over again. "Are you finished now? Like, you still can play. Go ahead and play right now." And just, gets on top of the guys, but so out of character for Gretzky as well. But I can't help but laugh.
I got to say this just quickly. So he's on, as you know, he's an analyst now with Bastie and these guys, and they were talking about off-season workouts, and Gretzky talked about all the stuff that he was doing. And Bastie was saying, well, I was, doing the military press and, these different, and Gretzky said, "Well, sounds like you were training for the Army. I was training to play in the NHL." Right? So yeah, that would be, but yeah, I mean, listen, just wonderful, wonderful human beings that, they don't have to be great on the ice to be a good person. Like some of my greatest teammates were fourth liners who just cared about people.
Yeah.
Right. They were selfless.
And I want to bring this up because obviously this is something that's near and dear to my heart as well. And you do this so much, and you don't do this for acknowledgement or edification. But I think if you're doing the right thing, it always gets to be said. But, I have a real near and dear heart to mental health and addiction as well. And you've been doing this. You've been clean now 17 years. You just had an anniversary from your son's birthday where you got sober. And now I say this is a very special kind of tribute because I use Sheldon Kennedy as an example of this, but there's some people that go through trauma and they can't get through it. There's other people that can go through trauma and they can get through it. And then there's people that go through trauma, they can get through it, and then they can help other people to get through it. And those are people like yourself and Sheldon Kennedy, where you've gone through that trauma, and you've been able to push through it, help heal, find out what the trigger was, what was the disconnect, what was the disconnection, and then be able to share that with other people as well. And, the amount of people that you've helped get sober, people that I know, one particular individual, obviously we'll keep him anonymous, but I called you one night, you went to his house and you picked him up and you drove him to Ottawa, and he sat there for 30 days and he came back, he lost 40 pounds and came back and got a chance to get his life back on track. And, having a conversation with him right after you do that for him as well, that nobody else in his family was able to do, or nobody else, in his friends that could have gotten to do it. But, you do constant work in the community that way. And I just wanted to acknowledge you for what you do and have you speak a little bit about, the mental health and addiction that you see out there and the help that's available for people that are looking for it or might be looking for it.
So the best way I can put it is this: it's one life at a time, and we have to do our part. All of us, and I know you're a big advocate of this, but for people who are suffering or family members, it's get them help. And you don't know who it is, where it's coming from. I call, when I was in rehab, they said, stay sober. My counselor, Brian, little gifts fall from the sky. And my gift today is doing this podcast, because anybody who watches this podcast, Chuck, there might be one person out there that finds something, a seed planted in their family that you and I helped today. And Cam, give Cam a shout out there. But anyway, my point is, you don't give up on them. And, it's longer. There is something I'll say, until somebody wants to change, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah.
And, we don't know when that person's going to say, you know what, I've had enough. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And all these great catchy phrases that I love. But, you don't stop loving, and people say, well, they're abusing, they're doing this and that. Okay. You don't need to be abused, but you keep showing them love. And eventually, Chuck, hopefully, not everybody is saved, but hopefully they come around to say, you know what, I'm going to take that olive branch and go get help.
I'm going to throw this out there because there's people out there that are watching. If they are watching, we all do better for example. So I'll start with myself and then I'll defer to you. in the healing process. And I never had problems with addiction. So I'll just get that out of the way right now. So I'm not speaking as if I have been an addict or it just never did anything for me. It wasn't booze or drugs. I did have a really bad addiction to gambling. There's a huge thing that I had with dopamine, playing poker, the highs, and right in that point, that poker table. Women, I love chasing women, as a kid as well. And the hole inside of me that I was missing is I just had no self worth. And I was getting it from external sources, looking for if you give me a piece of you that you're going to give me as part of your time or intimacy or interest level, then I start to feel that I'm not horrible or I'm not, like just a complete train wreck. How my ego tells me that I am at those points, because we all have that inner critic as well. So, when I started to do that healing and realize that voice inside of me, it wasn't me. It was my society. It was my parents. It was my education. It was everything else that was a filtered, but it sounds like it's my voice in my narrative saying, go do this. We should do that. You don't like that person. But that person there, I call my Chucky doll. He's on my shoulder and he's just yipping away. And he's my feedback to keep me safe as an 8-year-old boy because I have an unhealed wound that's inside of my heart that has not been healed yet. And now, the saying is whatever you resist persists. So I don't argue with Chucky anymore. I just say, hey, Chucky, thanks a lot for sharing. Really got that you're upset about that. We got a whole new set of tools. We're good right now. And then Chucky goes, oh, yeah, you got this. And then Chucky goes away. And then I'm able to use a new set of tools of empathy, compassion, listening, asking for clarity. Rather than reacting, I can respond now because I've started to do that healing as well. So I just want to ask, what was your healing moment that you got through it with sobriety?
So I was, hundreds saying that night through the I'm done. This is it. I'm finished. And then we go and we use again. Like this was a movie that just kept running on for years. So I was in Edmonton, my hometown, and I'd been on a 2-day crash course. And ironically, when I was flying home was my youngest son's birthday. And it had nothing to do with his birthday at the moment. I was living on my own at this time, just split up with my ex-wife, lost my family, all that stuff that you go through. And I quietly got home and never knowing when you're going to have enough. So I started pouring liquor out and flushing pills, throwing paraphernalia out and not sure if that was it. But I was really calm about it. That's what was different, Chuck. I was really just like, okay, went to bed. I woke up, started a whole new plan. 1 minute at that point, it's not 1 day at a time, it's 1 minute at a time. Because the minute you start with what you just said, those, endorphins and everything that I need to get jacked up again, I had to keep them in check.
Yeah.
So I won't bore you with the whole, journey I went on, but this November 17th, I celebrated 17 years, and it started on that moment that, as Theo Fleury said, we surrender.
Yeah.
And that's what I say to somebody, when you can surrender quietly, it's a peaceful situation. There's no fight. And I was just, I was, comes back to the saying, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was just done. So, when I got into OxyContin, I don't know if you ever seen Dope
Oh,
Sick.
Bastie. Yeah.
500,000 people died on that, and I should have been one of them. There was nights I was laying in bed on cocaine and OxyContin and booze that my heart was beating so, like it was so wild that I'm like, okay, I was scared to move. I was scared to move my leg, and I'm like, I'm going to die tonight. My heart is going to blow up. So I had a few nights like that where I'm going, okay, this is actually going to happen. I'm going to be a victim of overdose, and so anyways, I survived it and quietly surrendered, and I tell everybody this: there's no hand clapping. It's quiet success, and as every day goes by that I'm sober, it's a little victory. We say that we never say we're never going to drink or do drugs again. All I know, Chuck, it is 3:02, and I haven't drank or done drugs today. So I'm having a great day. Exercised already, you know, stuck to my program, and things are great in my life. But I can promise you this: if I went to the other team again, I always say this: if I go back to that team, I'm probably not coming back because the
No.
destruction it made in my life already. To even think of going back there, I'm checking out.
I have one of my best friends is an addiction counselor as well, and he was a diesel mechanic. Took a course with me. Stepped aside, went back and got a grant from the school. Went to school for addiction recovery. He's been clean for 12 years now. When I ask him about this, he has a great line in his system. He's like, like when you and I did that course together, you had a BlackBerry. I'm like, yeah, I love my BlackBerry. A great text pad, and you're a big fan of that. I'd still have a BlackBerry now if it didn't go under. And he's just like, the way I want to give you the parable, the metaphor about it is now is like now it's been 10 years. You have iPhones now, and they're all computers, these phones now. You would never go back to a BlackBerry, would you? And I'm like, no, I never would, because the technology is so poor. It's just a phone, whereas like smartphones now are computers. He's like, that's what going back to booze or drugs would be for me. He's like, that's the best I had back then was the BlackBerry, but that was the best technology we had back then. And that's the choice I had back then. And now I don't need to use my BlackBerry anymore. I don't have this compulsion of using my BlackBerry because I got better tools now. I got better technology now. I got better options now. I got better resources. I got better support system. So, yes, my sobriety is number one, but I'm not white knuckling it going through all that because of my support system that I have, the tools I have, the confidence I have in the system. And tell you the truth, I don't miss it. I don't miss disappointing people. I don't miss missing deadlines. I don't miss, being unpresent and, being, off my rocker and always arguing with people. I like my life right now. And I know what, like you said, if I go back to that other team, my life goes back to unworkability, and I kind of like my life being workable. So, better tools now, better hope. And that's all you can really hope for.
And I follow not that celebrities we're all human beings, but I love like the Bradley Coopers and Brad Pitts. These guys were out of control wild. They survived it. And to listen to them tell kids, who look up to them, that how manageable and how great their life is now. I got sober at 41 years old. Imagine that. And I spent since 12 years old, just once I found drugs and alcohol, it was, wow, this is unbelievable. Right. So yeah, it's a powerful thing to help a family, going back to your original question, to save a life, be part of something that, I say this every time I have an effect on an individual or family. It's like scoring an NHL goal.
Yeah.
And I know you've heard me before. The NHL, I know, was not my calling.
Yeah.
And it was my dream, but playing in the NHL, going through the addiction, going through death row, suicide, all the things that I went through with my,
journey.
My journey, or I call it the black hole, has given me so much hope to help people now. And, when I get a call, my wife sits there and I'll be on a 2-hour call with somebody who's suicidal. And I'll get off the phone. She looks at me. She goes, I don't know how you do it. And I said, I have to do it. She's not saying like I don't want you to do it, but I have to do it. This is somebody's child. Like we got kids. She gets it. Like she's just, but her point was, oh my gosh, like, doesn't that affect you? Of course it affects
the capacity you have to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it takes a lot
deep
out of
capacity.
Me.
Yeah.
But when you realize the power of helping somebody in such a crisis, there's, I don't want to get into our world right now, but you look at the devastation in Israel and Gaza and all and the people under buildings, and these people have, when they say, this extra human strength, these men are pulling rocks off that you and I couldn't even think of budging, because they know there's people underneath there. It's one life at a time. It doesn't matter what it is, where it is, right?
Yeah, and I benefited a lot more along the the addiction, mental health side, because we've talked about the addiction, but not so much the mental health, but just on therapy. Having a good therapist. There's a wonderful Netflix movie out right now that Jonah Hill produced and directed, the kid from Superbad. He was in Moneyball, and he went through therapy, and obviously he was an overweight kid, his entire life, with obesity that he fought, and self-worth and self-esteem. And there's a wonderful, wonderful movie about his therapist and him that he made a movie about. I think it's called Stutz or something like that. It's the therapist's last name, but it's an amazing story about what therapy does. The small wins you should get every single session. Finding the right therapist. Talking about your traumas and your incompletions in your journey. And one of the things I've learned about, you made it to the NHL. The best I got close to is playing with you guys who played in the NHL. And there's a long time, for years. My draft year was Trevor Kidd, and I had a tryout with Trevor in Manitoba before my dad got posted to come out to Ontario. So I never knew if I could have actually played at that level, at the NHL level. Then I come to Brampton. There's a goalie that was heads and shoulders above all of us, named Jason Curry. Jason got drafted by Hartford. He went to Clarkson School. Never made it. Played a great year in the AHL, but he was 10 times better than I was in every level. But there's that incompletion that you think to yourself, I never made it. And for the longest time, I thought my whole calling was to be an NHL hockey player, or to be a great hockey player. And I never got that. And so, but I never had the closure to think, did I give it a shot to go to the AHL like Jason did? And I never did. And now I realize that in your journey, we have this destination disease that we yearn for. If I only had this, then I would be good. If I got to this place, I'd be happy. And then what I realized is that when we're doing the work to get to that goal or have that purpose or to fill that wish, it's usually 3 or 4 steps away from what we think the carrot is leading us to. And it's actually the life that you're going to come into connection with because you played hockey, that you knew a guy who played hockey, who has a friend who's messing up his life right now, who needs to get clean. And that's where the real journey is the amount of help that you've done, because what you thought you were working towards was your ego goal versus where you now are be able to create the community, the sobriety, the peace of mind, the connection that you do with the Aurora Tigers, that you've been rewarded for the Aurora Hall of Fame, that you do with your family, the GT prospects. All of that is a small portion that has to do with hockey, but you had to get to do the hockey to get into those circles, to have those conversations, to have the leadership ability, to have the ability to talk to those people, to connect with them, have them trust you. And the real work gets to be done what you do in the community. And that's your real legacy, Jim Thomson.
It's you said it all right there, and that's true. It's I say this, one of the things that really helps me when I go into an intervention or go into a conference, or when I do my guest speaking, and that the fact that I did play in the NHL, and you always have a hockey fan, you always have somebody that wants to meet you, and what was it like playing with Gretzky, and all these things that people want to know, is something that, adds to my credibility. It adds to my, my PowerPoint, of guys, I lived my dream, but I also sat in your chair and was in rehab for 30 days to save my family and my life. So, when I go into a rehab place and talk to, the people in there and find out, why they're in there and all that, I was sitting in their chair. So back to your statement, Chuck. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing that I survived it, and till the day I die, I will give back and try to help as many people as I can, because that's my calling.
So what's in store for Jim Thomson this year?
You know what? Continuing to do what I love to do. I love hockey. I love my Aurora Tigers. I love helping. Like, there's nothing that can change in my life that, every new opportunity, player, family, intervention, everything is a new opportunity to be part of something. I become part of families. You go in, and I don't want to just bring it around interventions or mentoring in that, but you go into a family and you keep working that family on really good stuff. And man, that's just a beautiful thing, because you said this earlier. It's like having your own team. I got all these teams that are depending from California, Newfoundland, everywhere I go to help somebody. And it's like, oh, California, the area code comes up and it's like, okay, 3 hours behind, but I'm blessed. I'm blessed to continue to do what I love. And I was telling somebody today, and this story. Find something that you're passionate about and love doing, and you never work a day in your life. And I'm blessed with that.
Yeah, and I had a friend of mine that came up to me and said, "Hey, listen, you're in the hockey world and you roll in those hockey circles, and nowhere as close to where you are. But he's like, if you have one person to, I've got a 16-year-old, where I put him in, like Jim Thomson.
That's
kind. There's not even a second thought about that, because I've been at your JT prospect, camps in the summertime. Some of the stories we could tell about that. One of the very first years of the referee idea we had, of me being on the ice calling terrible penalties on both sides of that box, and then having the camera in the stands to watch the reaction, and then after they're off the ice, they're losing their shit. They say, "Hey, I'm gonna call a really ridiculous penalty on you guys, and you don't even know where it's coming from." Like, no, come on, ref, don't do that, man. It's a really close game, and like, it's July, no one's gonna remember this game, but I promise you're gonna remember this lesson. And then after the game's over and they're all upset, they go upstairs, and there you and I are talking. There they are on the camera there, and like, can you control what the referee does on the ice? And everybody goes, no. I'm like, so that's a non-controllable. You can control the controllables, right? Which is your reaction, your play, your attitude, your energy. Yeah. So like, this guy's not going to talk about that. And then they all sit in their seat. They're like, oh. And it was perfect, because that's a metaphor for life. It just doesn't just stop at hockey.
We kicked the kid off because he went sideways on you, and I was up top and I yelled at him to get off the ice because he couldn't control a fun situation. And there was a perfect example of where we taught that young man a lesson. You could have controlled that, but you couldn't. So now, going into the next stages of his days in life, he learned something so valuable, right?
I've been in prisons.
They didn't even know we were setting them up.
No, and that's the whole thing where the lesson is, because now they catch it themselves. And I've been in prisons where I've been doing talks in prisons and, saying, listen to these guys talk about one moment. I had one really bad blow up moment, and I'm in here for 10 years, or I'm in here for 8 years, or I'm in here for life, or whatever that is. And if we actually were able to pass it on using the tool of hockey, connect to these kids and something that they're passionate about, that they can learn about, then they get the lesson. And then when the lesson, starts in that point there, and they're younger, hopefully they keep that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Story I want to tell about you before we go. So there's a great Canadian band, Platinum Blonde.
Yeah.
So my kids knew who the Platinum Blonde was because they listened to me. I listened to the music all the time. So I had them all. Yeah, I said, the drummer from Platinum Blonde's coming. He's going to be our guest referee. And they're like, no way. Right? So anyways, Chuck shows up and all the kids are like, oh,
but you took me aside beforehand and said, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to introduce you like this.
And I was just with Yeah. But what happens is that next summer, Matthew Galley, who played on the Aurora Tigers, dad was in Platinum Blonde, Serge Galley. So I said, Chuck, our gig is up. I said, I actually have one of the players. His dad is Platinum Blonde. So ironically, I saw Matthew and Serge last weekend at a wedding, and great news. Platinum Blonde are going to start playing again, and I love going to see them. They're a great gig, but yeah, they've been on the shelf for a while. And
I want to say it was your first year that you owned the Tigers, when you brought Mark Holmes and Serge, and they dropped the puck off at the Tigers, right. And
along with Storage Wars.
Yeah. And we had just had the Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer, and I was talking to Mark Holmes, during the day, and obviously I knew who he was, but he thought it was Kurt Harnett.
Yeah,
And he
yeah,
was
sure.
talking to me, and I guess him and Kurt had gone out and done something one time. I'm like, I want to stop you here right now, Mark, because I think you think I'm Kurt Harnett. And I had the sunglasses back, and it was like 30 degrees that day. And then, so when I saw him at the VIP room at your home opener, I told him that story. He goes, "Yeah, man, I remember that." That was so funny. But what a small world, Serge Galley's kids could be in that room and say, "He's not the drummer for
Yeah,
Platinum Blonde." And my dad's the lead guitarist and
yeah,
for Platinum Blonde, and it was like, wow, what are the chances that's gonna happen?
yeah. Great laughs and memories.
Small world. Well, Jim, thanks a lot for being on the show tonight. We want to give you the last word. Where can we find the Aurora Tigers? Where can people find the JT Prospects Camp? If you have a kid that you want to take their game to another level on or off the ice, this is a fantastic way for you to empower your kid by giving them the gym and go to JT Prospects Camp. And if he's lucky, he becomes an Aurora
Go to
Tiger.
my yeah, no, go to my social media, Jim Thomson 33, and that's now with X or Instagram. It goes to my Facebook, and you'll have the Aurora Tigers. Everything is on there. So Jim Thomson 33, no P in Thompson, and the words of wisdom, Chucky. If you can be anything in this world, be kind. Thank
Be
you for
kind.
having me.
Thanks a lot, Jim Thompson.
Thanks.
Great having Jim on the show. Like I go back with Jim, 15 years or whatever. So having him on the show every single, time always opens up something new to me as well. So I want to bring up my producer, Cam LaRock, and see what Cam's thinking. So Cam, what did you think of the Jim Thompson story?
That was very entertaining, I must say. You two work well together on a podcast.
I think it's a hair thing.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe
Jim's got great hair as
those two
well.
perfect
So
combinations.
yeah, it's I'm telling you, like people, they look at him and they think he's a big guy. He works out a lot. He's in great shape, but I mean, like you put a stick in that guy's hand and he's an assassin with that. Like he's got a shot that is just insanely good. And I mean, like we could go up and down what he did on the ice as well and how talented he was as well. But the thing that I love about Jim Thompson is what he does off the ice and
Yeah,
the impact he'll
absolutely.
have in his community as well with the Aurora Tigers, his prospects, and what he does off with mental health and addiction as well. So, yeah. So, what were your thoughts?
I
Takeaways?
loved it, man. There was a lot of different things I could comment on now. One thing that really stuck out with me and something I'm probably going to tell my roommates about is Jim's first game covering Mary Lemieux. That's something
Yeah.
that's crazy. I would probably be, yeah, I wouldn't be able to handle that situation at all. But that's a crazy story right there. I also liked, something I never really thought about that Jim brought up was he didn't like fighting, but he was assigned to fight. It was just something he had to do. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of other players that have that same thing going for them where they don't really want to fight, but in order to keep their job and stay on this team, they have to fight, and that leads to
Yeah.
problems later on. It's not like
It
an
does.
MMA fighter who signs up to fight.
Yeah.
There's a hockey player who's told to fight.
Yeah.
And
And
that
I
was
mean,
something I
like,
never really
believe
thought
me when I
about
tell
before.
you, he was just an insanely talented hockey player.
Yeah,
Like how he could have been a 30 goal scorer quite easily in the NHL had he not one punched that one kid when he was 14 years old as an underager playing junior hockey. That just changed the trajectory of his life. And when I was talking to him in the arena the first time, I said, "Hey, listen, like why did you become a fighter, or how are you a fighter when you're just this insanely talented hockey player?" And like we all have that one story. There's that one sliding door where something moved or something changed and the trajectory of our life moved, and now we're talking about it, or now it's an impact of what it is as well. So I'm just glad that Jim actually found what that was, that gift that was, because again there's hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, that have been given a second chance at a family or their personal life because of Jim Thompson and what he does off the ice, hockey aside, but obviously on the mental health and addiction side as well. He does tireless work in the community as well, and he's a really it's an amazing honor for him to be in the Aurora Hall of Fame. But I think the honor is with Aurora for having Jim done all the work he's done to get to that point as well. And I just have nothing but great things to say about Jim Thompson.
yeah, absolutely. I'm just glad I got a chance to meet with him and interact a little bit.
Yeah. He's a charming guy.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't want to get him on game day when they lose. That passion spills over as well. So, and his wife Rita will tell you the same thing as well. So Cam, we're going to end this up as well. We've gone a little over today, but I really want to thank you all for joining in today. I want to thank Padskins for sponsoring the segments of our podcast, as well as Holy Chuck Burgers and Mixed Chicks Hair Products as well. There's no such thing as bad boys. There's boys with bad hair. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next show.